If we, for us to have that in November, that gives us 7 months to get through a code amendment and building permit process, which makes it urgent and important that it moves forward quickly. And so that's the ask today, is that when you're reviewing all of the things that the huge docket of items that this receives high priority, we have an opportunity to really change the youth sport and adult sport experience on the island, particularly around racket sports. And we appreciate all your help and have one more ask that we get high priority today. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further appearances. We will now move on to special business. Our first item of special business is AB 6386, Councilmember Oaths of Office and Mayor and Deputy Mayor elections. I will conduct the oaths of office to the successfully elected council members Dave Rosenbaum, Wendy Weicker, Craig Reynolds, and Jake Jacobson. I will then conduct the mayor election and turn the meeting over to the new mayor to conduct the election for deputy mayor and continue leading the meeting. Or if the new mayor would prefer, I can also conduct the election for deputy mayor. I will be administering the oaths of office in order of position. Dave Rosenbaum, position number 1. Wendy Weicker, position number 3. Craig Reynolds, position number 5. And Jake Jacobson, position number 7. I have also presented elected council members with their certificate of election. I will call on successful candidates in position order to administer the oaths. Please have your microphone and camera turned on when it is your turn to take the oath if you are attending via Zoom. After the election and oaths for mayor and deputy mayor, we will take a brief recess to take pictures and change the seating order. We will now begin the oaths of office. I will ask council to slide to the side. On each side, we're going to do the oaths directly behind me. Councilmember Rosenbaum. Please raise your right hand and please repeat after me. I, Dave Rosenbaum,
I, Dave Rosenbaum,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the laws of the state of Washington,
the laws of the state of Washington,
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge
discharge
the duties of office of City of Mercer Island,
the duties of office of City of Mercer Island,
Council position number 1,
Council position number 1,
according to the law
according to the law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Councilmember Rosenbaum. Councilmember Weicker. Please raise your right hand. I, Wendy Weicker,
I, Wendy Weicker,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States of America
the Constitution of the United States of America
and the laws of the state of Washington
and the laws of the state of Washington
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge the duties
perform and discharge the duties
of the office of City of Mercer Island,
of the office of the City of Mercer Island,
Council position number 3,
Council position number 3,
according to the law
according to the law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Councilmember Weicker. I'm going to slide onto Zoom for this one. Councilmember Reynolds, please raise your right hand. I got a microphone that's on. I, Craig Reynolds,
I, Craig Reynolds,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the laws of the state of Washington,
the laws of the state of Washington,
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge the duties
perform and discharge the duties
of the office of City of Mercer Island,
of the office of City of Mercer Island,
Council Position Number 5,
Council Position Number 5,
according to the law
according to the law
and to the best of my abilities.
and to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Councilmember.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Jacobson. Please raise your right hand. I, Jake Jacobson,
I, Jake Jacobson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the laws of the state of Washington,
the laws of the state of Washington,
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge the duties
perform and discharge the duties
of the office of City of Mercer Island,
of the office of the City of Mercer Island,
Council Position Number 7,
Council Position Number 7,
according to the law
according to the law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Congratulations, council members.
Oh, thank you.
Under Washington state law, in a council manager form of government, council members choose a mayor and deputy mayor from among themselves biennially at the first meeting of the year. The election process is outlined in Section 2 of the Mercer Island City Council Rules of Procedure. First, I will call for nominations of mayor. If there is only one nominee, it is appropriate to make a motion and have the city clerk conduct a roll call vote for that nomination. If more than one nomination is made, an open election is conducted by roll call vote to decide amongst those nominated who shall be elected. The roll call vote shall be conducted as follows. The city clerk shall call each council member by name. Each council member will reply with aye, nay, or abstain if they do not wish to vote. The city clerk will tally the votes. If a nominee receives a majority vote of the city council, the city clerk shall declare the nominee receiving the majority vote as the new mayor. Elections will continue until the mayor and deputy mayor have been elected by a majority vote of the city council, which is 4 votes. Upon the election of mayor, the city clerk shall administer the oath of office to the mayor, who shall thereupon assume the role of chair of the meeting. The mayor will then proceed in the same fashion with the election of deputy mayor, or if they prefer, I can conduct the election of deputy mayor as well. Okay, I will now entertain nominations for a council member to serve as mayor for 2024 and 2025.
I nominate Salim Neese.
Second. Nominations don't require a second.
Oh, sorry. Let the record show that I did, though.
Are there any further nominations? There being no other nominations, nominations for mayor are now closed. Seeing that there is only one nomination, is there a motion for Councilmember Neese to be mayor for 2024 and 2025?
So moved.
Second? Seconded by Jacobson? It was moved by Weicker, seconded by Andral, for Councilmember Neese to be mayor for 2024 and 2025. I will now conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Andral,
Aye.
and Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mayor Neese. We will now conduct the oath of office for mayor. Please raise your right hand. I, Councilmember Salim Neese,
I, Councilmember Salim Neese,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of the office of
discharge the duties of the office of
Mayor of the City of Mercer Island
Mayor of the City of Mercer Island
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Mayor Neese.
Thank you.
Would you like me to conduct the deputy mayor election? Okay, congratulations, Mayor Neese. He has asked me to conduct the election of the deputy mayor. So I will now entertain nominations for a council member to serve as deputy mayor for 2024 and 2025.
I nominate Dave Rosenbaum.
Are there any further nominations? There being no other nominations, nominations for deputy mayor are now closed. Seeing that there is only one nomination, is there a motion for Councilmember Rosenbaum to be deputy mayor for 2024 and 2025?
So moved.
Second.
It was moved by Councilmember Jacobson, seconded by Councilmember Andral, that Councilmember Rosenbaum be deputy mayor for 2024 and 2025. I will now conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Andral,
Aye.
Mayor Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
and Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum, please raise your right hand. I, Dave Rosenbaum,
I, Dave Rosenbaum,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of the office of
discharge the duties of the office of
Deputy Mayor of the City of Mercer Island
Deputy Mayor of the City of Mercer Island
to the best of my
to
ability.
the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Deputy Mayor. We will now take a 10-minute recess.
Andrea, I'm going to interrupt. We're going to need more than 10 minutes. Let's plan on coming back at 5:40.
Perfect. We will now recess until 5:40.
All right, welcome back to the Mercer Island City Council regular meeting. We were in recess from 5:20 PM to 5:45 PM. And next item on our agenda is the city manager's report. And we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Happy New Year. All right, Casey is driving the PowerPoint for me. Let's go ahead into the next slide. This is just a reminder, whoops, there we go, that with the permanent closure of City Hall, the easiest way to access city staff for assistance with any of your city services is to contact our customer service team. I've got this slide up here with our phone number and the email address should you need any assistance. Next slide, please. All right, council, we're back in the swing of things with meetings and business resuming as usual. I'll remind you that your next hybrid city council meeting will be Tuesday, January 16th. Our boards and commissions are also back to business. Design Commission meets tomorrow at 6 o'clock. The Parks and Rec Commission meets Thursday at 5 o'clock. And next week, the Utility Board will be meeting on January 9th at 5 o'clock. Next slide, please. All right, city updates. A few things to catch you up on. First of all, City Hall transitions. A lot of work is still underway to address the permanent closure of our City Hall facility. First up, we are back in person for city council meetings. Thank you to all of the staff and our consultants and contractors that helped get this room that we're sitting in tonight, the Slater room, converted over to our council chambers. I will mention to you, City Council, and also to anyone watching the meeting remotely, we have a lot of fine tuning and adjustments to make. The room is tight. As you know, we're pretty squeezed in here. But we welcome your feedback. If you have any suggestions, things you'd like to change for the next meeting, please just drop Andrea Larson, our city clerk, an email and CC me, and we'll keep working on it. Mercer Island Municipal Court is almost fully moved to Newcastle City Hall. I say almost because while the courtroom space, which will be in the Newcastle Council Chambers, is ready to go with kind of the last touches will be in place by Monday. The staff offices that we've leased on the third floor of the building are not quite ready to go yet. We had a delay with carpet installation, so that set us back a little bit, but we're making do and working away on that. We expect to see the carpet and the last remaining tasks wrapped up in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then that will be ready to go. We are making progress with the police modular buildings. Council, you may recall that we're bringing in modular buildings to the City Hall parking lot for police. We've had, unfortunately, more setbacks than we'd like with that project, but the utility engineering, basically all the work that we needed to do to connect the building to power, sewer, and water is moving forward. The building designs were approved by L&I, and the buildings, I believe, have now been approved to be transported to City Hall. So we're making progress. We hope to have the buildings in place by the end of the month and connected in early February. I want to give a shout out of all the lists I just went through of operational transitions. Certainly the court and the police have been the most impacted by the closure of City Hall. And I just wanted to say thank you to those staff teams and our patrons for their continued flexibility as we work through this big transition. All right, next slide, please, Casey. The community center, actually where we're meeting from tonight, was closed for the last 2 weeks. And council, I just wanted to share a little bit about the work that was completed. That picture on the right, you can see that we moved all the furniture out of the lobby. We steam cleaned all the carpets. We cleaned all the furniture. The Mercer room floor was replaced again. You might recall it was replaced a year ago, but the product was faulty. So we waited until this last December to do it all again. So we hope that's the last replacement for a while. We went through the building. We did a lot of touch-up work, painting. We had a lot of work to do on the HVAC system. Some of that is still being resolved. And then we also did some finishing touches on this room, the Slater room. And we reopened to the public today, and it was actually pretty busy here. I worked here most of the day. So nice job to the community center staff and the facility staff for getting all of that done. Next slide, please. Just a few features. Even though many of us took time off over the holidays, our maintenance teams were out and very busy. Water team was out working on leaking service line from the water main in the 4100 block of 94th Avenue Southeast. That's the picture there on the right. They also did quite a bit of annual maintenance work last month, mostly on the pressure reducing station in the 8100 block of West Mercer Way, keeping our utilities operational. Next slide, please. The stormwater team is battling a beaver that is very busy building a dam. On the right there, they conducted drainage clearing, including several days clearing a stormwater trash rack. That's that picture on the right on Southeast 53rd, where, as I just mentioned, we have a very busy beaver working to make that space his or her home. They also jetted and cleared a 12-inch stormwater pipe near 62nd, actually on the south end of the island. This was really important during these heavy rains to clear out that root intrusion. Next slide, please. And the right-of-way team, also still very busy. They were out addressing a broken limb that was hanging high up in a fir tree and had become dangerous. Thank you for addressing that right away. We also are still cleaning up leaf and fall blow down debris. So they've been out sweeping the roads and the town center, really trying to stay ahead of all that. They also are the team that kept all of the lights on in town center, and we thank them for keeping everything very festive during this winter season. Next slide, please. The Island Crest Way project, 4004 Island Crest Way. If you've been by, it's looking really great. I drove by this morning. We completed the installation of irrigation, topsoil, mulch, and plants. The lawn area has been seeded. It will take a little while for that to obviously take hold. I mentioned last time I was in front of you, the sidewalks are done. So this project is substantially complete while we just wait for that grass to come in. Thank you to all the team members that worked on cleaning up that parcel and making it look really quite amazing. All right, heads up on a couple upcoming events. We made the transition yesterday to Eastside Fire and Rescue. Congratulations to all of our team members. We had many, many promotions, and we got to celebrate all of those team members last month. Now, as we are into January 2024, we'd like to invite council, certainly you and members of our community, out to the fire stations to meet our team members and also learn a little bit more about Eastside Fire and Rescue. We have 2 open houses scheduled. The first one is Wednesday, January 10th at Station 91. That's our fire station in Town Center. That's at 5:30. And the second open house is Station 92. That's on the south end near the QFC Shopping Center. That is Saturday, January 13th from 10 to noon. So come on out and meet your fire team. Okay, some good news, and I'll wrap it up. Illuminate MI was really successful. We added more lights and certainly got a lot of very positive feedback from our community on the event. The lights will be up for just a little while longer, but I wanted to take a moment tonight and thank our sponsors for making it happen again this year. Puget Sound Energy, Street Treats, Haboba, and John L. Scott Real Estate. Thank you very much. Next slide. Also, a big shout out and thank you to all of the donors that supported the YFS holiday programs. We were able to distribute food assistance to 139 families for holiday meals, as well as holiday gifts to 95 children. These programs were supported by all of our community members and the businesses, and obviously happened in a strong partnership with the YFS Foundation. All right, next slide. Okay, I had to wrap it up with a quick go dogs. I'm not sure the ulcer in my stomach is fully recovered from watching last night's game, but whether you're a Husky fan or not, it's certainly an honor to see one of our universities represented in the national championship game. So a big Go Dogs, Go Huskies will be cheering you on. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which contains AB 6387, December 1, 2023 payroll certification, AB 6388, December 15, 2023 payroll certification, certification of claims for December 1, 8, 15, and 22, 2023, City Council meeting minutes of December 5, 2023, regular hybrid meeting, AB 6380, Luther Burbank Boiler Building Phase LBB1 bid award. Council, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Consent agenda passes. Our first item of regular business is AB 6385, 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update, Housing Element HB 1220 implementation, for which we'll welcome CPD Director Jeff Thomas. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. For the record, Jeff Thomas with CPD. And while we're firing up a presentation here, I'd like to introduce our Senior Planner, Adam Zach. He'll be doing the bulk of the presentation this evening. And our Deputy Director, Allison Van Gorp, is also in the virtual audience to support our conversation on this evening. We'll roll right to slide number 2, Adam, if you will. I'm going to be brief here with my introductory remarks and then turn it over to Adam. The purpose of this item here this evening is to provide an overview on 2 important reports that are needed to not only successfully support the implementation of House Bill 1220, which is one of the more frequently referenced pieces of state legislation here in recent years, but also to drive our effort forward to complete our required periodic update to our comprehensive plan, which is due currently, at least, due no later than December 31st, the end of this year, essentially. So what we've got for you here this evening are presentations on 2 reports that have been drafted. The Land Capacity Analysis Supplement, which is Exhibit 1 to Agenda Bill 6385 in your packet, as well as the Racially Disparate Impacts Evaluation, which is Exhibit 2 to that same agenda bill. Council will recall that in July of last year, 2023, it approved a supplemental scope of work for our update to our comprehensive plan. These 2 reports that are in your packet and being presented here this evening are that supplemental scope of work that Council approved. So we had our initial scope that was approved in the spring of 2022. We had been working on that for a fairly lengthy period of time. Commerce came out with some implementation guidance related to this House Bill 1220. So we had to take a slight detour here over the last number of months to get that supplemental scope of work pulled together, have Council approve it, do the actual work, and then bring it to you here this evening for presentation. Last comment I'm going to make on this slide, these reports, Council is not required to take formal action on these 2 reports. Similar to a couple of other reports for our comprehensive plan update that were presented to you in the fall of 2022 related to economic development and a housing needs assessment. That said, what we are going to be asking Council for on January 16th, perhaps some direction here this evening at the end of our item, will be to provide some direction on 3 options that are going to be presented to you at the end of this presentation on how to close a capacity problem. It's a paper math exercise problem, essentially, related to an affordable housing target that we now have to incorporate into our comprehensive plan update, again, originating from this House Bill 1220. So let's say that one more time, just for clarity. No action required on these 2 reports, formal action from Council, but we will need direction on at least one of 3 options to help solve an affordable housing target capacity problem. Next slide, Adam. The agenda for tonight's presentation, we've broken it down into a few different sections. Adam's going to cover a really brief 3 or 4 slide background in addition to what I've said here at the top of the presentation. And then we're going to get right into providing an overview of the RDI evaluation. We will stop after that set of slides for question and answer. And then we'll move on to the land capacity analysis. We'll stop again after Adam presents that set of slides. And then we'll have a short set of slides related to those 3 options that I just referenced a moment ago for solving this capacity problem. Then Mayor will wrap it up and we'll turn it back to you for any Q&A, any additional Q&A and discussion. So with that, Adam, I'm going to turn things over to you and we'll get right into the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Jeff mentioned, we are currently in the process of updating our comprehensive plan, and this is a periodic review that's required by the statewide law. And we, in this process here, we're in this orange slice of the pie at the top here, the comprehensive plan periodic review. And that fits within this kind of larger process whereby after we adopt that periodic review, where we set our goals and policies that provide kind of the high level direction of how we'll manage growth. In the years following the adoption of that periodic review, the updated comprehensive plan, we then implement those policies and that will include some new annual reporting and monitoring requirements that were established in the state law by the legislature last year. And then at the 5-year point, so 5 years after we've updated the periodic review or updated the comprehensive plan, we then have a check-in, and this is a new thing that we'll be doing with Commerce and King County, kind of look at our progress towards achieving our comprehensive plan or realizing the plan. And then we would continue to work on implementing those the goals and policies of the comp plan before again returning to another periodic review currently scheduled for 2034. So that's kind of the larger process under the Growth Management Act. And tonight we're going to talk quite a bit about House Bill 1220. This is a bill that was enacted in 2021 by the Washington State Legislature that changes how we plan for housing under the Growth Management Act. And it really established a couple of key new requirements for housing. One is that cities must look at projected housing need at different income levels rather than just a total overall housing target that's been disaggregated now by projected income levels so that we're kind of planning for those, accommodating those different income levels. There's also a new requirement added by House Bill 1220 that we review housing policies for potential racially disparate impacts. Finally, we have new requirements for how we regulate emergency housing and accessory dwelling units coming out of House Bill 1220. So those are the kind of key pieces of that legislation. To address those new requirements, Commerce issued guidance earlier this year. And the 2 big pieces that came out of that Commerce guidance are the 2 reports that we'll be looking at tonight. The first is an evaluation of our data and city policies to examine whether or not racially disparate impacts have occurred, and then look at displacement risk and potential exclusion in housing policies. So that's that RDI evaluation we'll look at first tonight. And then also the Commerce guidance recommended a land capacity analysis to determine whether or not there is adequate capacity for those housing needs at the different income levels. So we'll take a look at that. That'll be the second report that we take a look at tonight. As Jeff mentioned, the scope of work was updated earlier this year to direct us to undertake these 2 reports. And so we'll be taking a look at that racially disparate impacts report and land capacity analysis report. And I don't think I need to say anything more about that. So we'll just get right into the racially disparate impacts evaluation. This is Exhibit 2 of the agenda bill, 6385. Starting first, I just wanted to give you the definition of racially disparate impact. This is kind of the thing that we're evaluating the data for to see if there's if these are occurring in Mercer Island. And the racially disparate impacts are defined as when policies, practices, rules, or other systems result in a disproportionate impact on one or more racial groups. And that comes straight from the Commerce guidance for evaluating these potential impacts. Then also, so now that we've defined racially disparate impacts, I wanted to give you just a quick look at what is the racially disparate impacts evaluation. This is a report that will identifies policies that might have resulted in these racially disparate impacts. It identifies potential policy amendments to begin to address and undo those impacts. And it identifies areas that may be at a higher risk of displacement from market forces. And all three of these things are things that we need to do to satisfy the GMA requirements that were established by House Bill 1220. There were 3 steps in preparing the RDI evaluation. The first was a review of our demographic data, some of the other data that was available. Then the second step was to look at and identify areas that are where there's an elevated risk of displacement. And then finally, an evaluation of our housing policies to identify those that may need amendment during our comp plan update. So after reviewing the demographic data, there were some trends that came out of that jumped out. In the report, there's about 30 exhibits that looked at different tables and data sources throughout the report. I'm just going to highlight a couple of kind of the key takeaways from that, but there's a lot of information in the report if you're interested in reading more. So after reviewing and comparing Mercer Island's population with the larger King County population, there were a couple of groups that stood out as being underrepresented in our Mercer Island population compared to the larger county. That's the Black or African American households or persons, sorry, are about 5 percentage points fewer a share of the population compared Mercer Island to King County. Another race alone is about 4 percentage points fewer, and then 2 or more races is slightly less than 1 percentage point fewer. So those are the underrepresented groups per the data. Some of the other things that were remarkable or from the data are that more renting households are cost burdened than homeowning households. And cost burden is a measure of when a household is paying more than 30% of their household income for housing costs. And those renting households are cost burdened at a rate more than 20 percentage points higher than homeowning households. Households of color are 8 percentage points more likely than white households to be housing cost burdened. Within that group, Black or African American households in Mercer Island are severely cost burdened at more than double the rate of any other racial group. So we found some, that was one of the impacts that we found after reviewing the data. The next section of the report looks at areas at risk of displacement. And displacement is when a household is forced or pressured to move from their community by factors outside of their control. So a lot of times this is like an economic displacement where a household is no longer able to afford this rent increases and housing cost increases in their community and are then need to move to a lower cost community. What we found in reviewing the data is that overall the displacement risk is low. So the Puget Sound Regional Council actually undertook a displacement risk mapping for the counties in Western Washington that they serve. So that's Snohomish, King, Pierce, and Kitsap counties. And in their displacement risk mapping, they showed the entirety of Mercer Island as being lower risk relative to the other areas surveyed. And then, but we did identify some characteristics of areas that still may have some displacement risk. And that would be areas with a higher proportion of renting households, given the cost burden rate among renting households. And then those block groups that have a greater share of older buildings, because those buildings are more likely to redevelop over time. And then finally, the multifamily and mixed use zones, because those are going to be places where we have a higher proportion of renters, again, kind of pointing back to that higher rate of cost burden among renters. So when we look through the city for places with those characteristics, we found 3 areas where there's an elevated risk of displacement. And that would be the south end of town center, shown here in the orange outline on the left side of the slide. The multifamily zones surrounding town center, shown in the map in the middle there. So those are kind of horseshoed around the town center. And then the multifamily zones east of town center, shown in the map on the right side of the slide here. And those are, that would be Shorewood is that larger area highlighted, and then Covenant Shores would be the area along the lakefront there across I-90. So those are the 3 areas that are highlighted as having an elevated risk of displacement. And what that means is through this process, we'll need to take a look at policies to that are directed at reducing displacement risk. So now that we have some areas identified where that may be an elevated risk, we can direct policy there later in the comp plan update process. So the final piece of the RDI evaluation was evaluating our housing policies based on the data review that was done in the first step and the second step, and based on the Commerce guidance. The Commerce provided a framework for evaluating policies for this report. We found that there were about 5 housing policies or housing element policies that may need to be amended during the comp plan update. And there were about 6 land use element policies that related to housing that would also need, we'll need to take a look at with the housing work group as we're updating the comp plan for potential amendment.
Hey, Adam, I'm going to
Yes.
jump in here briefly just for a moment. City Council and members of the public that are viewing this, Adam mentioned it there several slides ago, but I think it's worth reiterating. This Appendix A in the RDI evaluation and these policies and the one goal that are listed here on this slide, these are existing policies and an existing goal from our land use element that are actually in the 2015 comprehensive plan. That is the city's current comprehensive plan. So the exercise here that was put before us from House Bill 1220 and the State Department of Commerce to go through this RDI evaluation was to evaluate existing goals and policies in the current city comprehensive plan related to housing. So those related housing goals and policies primarily in our 2015 comprehensive plan lie within the housing element of the comprehensive plan, as well as some in the land use element. So what this RDI evaluation, which Appendix A is part of, did was it looked at our entire current housing element and then also the appropriate other goals and policies in other elements, which in our case was, I believe, strictly limited to also the land use element. So again, just to be clear, these are existing goals and policies from the 2015 comprehensive plan. What this does, this helps informs us moving forward as we move forward to updating or preparing a fresh housing element and also land use element for our 2024 periodic update of our comprehensive plan. This RDI evaluation will help inform, and Adam's going to get to this here in the next slide. Why don't you just flip to the next slide, Adam? It will help inform the work of the housing work group, which we hope to reconvene here later this month. And then also the planning commission here through late winter into spring, and then ultimately the city council to review and take action on our 2024 comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to make sure that was emphasized just for everyone's clarity on where those goals and policies came from and what exactly we're doing with the information. Go ahead, Adam, finish this slide up and I think we're done this section.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So the only other thing here is that there, with looking at our next steps, there is some public outreach that will be planned as part of this to kind of follow on to the findings of the report. We're planning to conduct a targeted survey of renting households to get some input from them that can help us as we update the comprehensive plan. Because we kind of identified those impacts to renters in particular. And then also the public can comment on our comprehensive plan update kind of throughout the process. And as we start drafting the housing element, we'll be soliciting comments there, putting out those drafts for public review. And then when we get to more or less the final draft before going to the public hearing, we plan on holding an open house where we'll get some input from the public on the housing element before the Planning Commission holds their public hearing and makes their final recommendation.
Adam, if we could just pause for a question from Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, are we at the end of this section? Because I can wait until we are if we're not.
We are.
Okay.
We are, yeah.
Mr. Zach, I wonder if you can just help me reconcile two things that I heard. One was a statement that overall we have low displacement risk. And then a slide or two after that, we talked about 3 areas that have not low displacement risk. Mm-hmm. And in particular, I'd like to get your comments on when in the next stage of this, we talk about the options for creating additional housing. It seems like at least 2 of the options, the town center option and the Shorewood option, could have the impact of increasing displacement. And to what extent have you considered that? Will we consider that? When is the appropriate time to consider that? And in particular, do we need to understand the racial makeup of those neighborhoods in order to appropriately and compliantly evaluate the impact of the displacement?
So there's a couple of, yeah, a couple of questions there. First, I think that, the purpose of identifying those areas that have some degree of displacement risk is that then we can make better decisions about the policies that might affect those areas. So we can take that kind of into consideration if we were to pursue an option that would affect one of those areas. We just would need to be aware of that elevated displacement risk there and the displacement implications of that. So it's not necessarily like those are identified as like a no-go zone. It's just we need to be aware of those risks. And then in terms of like when the appropriate time is to kind of enact those policies and address that, that would be through the policymaking process with the housing work group and the planning commission as we update the housing element. So we have to, one of the charges of House Bill 1220 is to adopt some policies that that address that displacement risk. And we can do that as we update the housing element in the next step.
That's helpful. If I can quick follow up. So would it be fair to summarize and say, before 1220, the displacement risk of those groups of those areas was low, of the whole island was low. But if we do the wrong thing here, whatever that may mean, it's at least there are 3 areas that we could create some non-low risk. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Council, any other questions? Councilmember Anderl.
Thanks for walking through this with us. This was quite dense and the slides helped a lot. So I appreciate that. As you were going through I was struck by a kind of an inconsistency in the way the data is being presented. For example, if you look at Exhibit 10, median household income by race or ethnicity, and then you look at Exhibit 22, percent of households experiencing housing cost burden, the categories there just don't match up. And I'm wondering, can we get an explanation about why there are, A, more categories in Exhibit 10, and B, how other race and persons of color in Exhibit 22 fits into the other categories that are set forth in Exhibit 10. Because, and one of the reasons I ask is because it occurred to me that if you combine Black or African American with persons of color, it's probably going to change the percentages. And don't see persons of color delineated as a separate category in Exhibit 10. So I'm trying to get a match of the data.
Mm-hmm. So Exhibit 22 comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, their comprehensive housing affordability strategy. And that was, whereas Exhibit 10 comes from the Census Bureau. So the difference in source is one of the reasons that there may be some slightly different categories. And then in Exhibit 22, that persons of color category, as I understand it, is essentially it's combining all of the non-white households in the rest of the table and providing a statistic for the other households within that category, or within that table. So I think I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think that those are likely the reason that there's some different categories there.
Is there a way to get the actual numbers underlying Exhibit 22 as opposed to just percentages?
I believe I can get those, the source data from the source data.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Councilmember Jacobson.
I think this is a similar question. But before I go there, I would commend the CPD for putting together this voluminous material from whatever sources it came, and also my colleagues, Ted Weinberg and Craig Reynolds, for asking a number of good and pointed questions, which will focus, I think, all of our attention. And I confess I did not have time to review the answers that came out around 4 this afternoon. So I know a lot of work went into that, and I look forward to digesting that. And my question may be somewhat similar to Councilmember Androl, and that is, I don't understand if people of color are not, if that's an ethnic call or it's a racial call, because whatever the sources, they seem to be coming from those issues differently. And for example, are Hispanics a different racial group, or are they just a different ethnic group? And who says that, and what entity has the final call on that? Because that, I think, is suggested by Councilmember Androl, I think that may make a difference in what the data shows, and then drive what action is taken at some subsequent point in the revised comp plan.
So the question, because that question of race and ethnicity and what the difference is there, that was challenging at times in compiling the report. In general, where in exhibits where when an ethnicity is presented alongside racial categories, I just deferred to the data source for how that would be presented. So how the Census Bureau would present that information, I presented that the same. And then, like in Exhibit 22, that came from HUD. I just presented it the way that was presented by the source. So there may be some slight differences throughout the report depending on the sources.
Well, the question is, if we are using different sources that define the populations whose housing fate we're considering, describe it differently, how do we decide what to do unless we find some singular definition that we apply across the board? And I believe also that would apply, would it not, to the risk of being, losing Shorewood or losing some existing multifamily housing?
Yeah, I don't know. Jeff, do you have thoughts there?
Yeah, to Councilmember Jacobson's question and the one before that, actually, Adam, can you just speak briefly to some of this? We weren't given a lot of creative license with this, right? We received our charge through the Commerce Guidance. It was fairly structured in terms of do this, do that, subtract A from B and get your answer, essentially, if that makes sense, Councilmember Jacobson. It was a recipe that was handed to us to produce this evaluation to satisfy the requirement of 1220 as interpreted through the Department of Commerce. So I completely understand a couple of the variations that are being cited here with the differences between census gives us this in this format, something else gives us that in a slightly different format, and how does all that get reconciled? Our job was to go through and compile the data as it was charged out in the guidance, and here we are with the evaluation. So is it perfect? No. Is it imperfect? Yes. There's just been 2 citations by 2 council members of situations where it probably is imperfect. When we move through and we get to, as we worked our way through the recipe to get to Appendix A of the evaluation, we put a lot of time and thought into that to try and figure out what does it really mean to the city, and more specifically, what does it mean for moving forward to trying to get a new housing element or an updated housing element put together so that we can attempt to complete this periodic review that's in front of us. In discussions with with Adam and with Allison, as we touched base with Arch along the way, our Affordable Housing Coalition group, the important thing here that really came out to me was that we're able to look at our current goals and policies, and we're able to say, we want to make sure that our next housing element is going to be not only GMA compliant, but it's also going to be compliant with House Bill 1220 as it incorporates into GMA. And it is going to give us the best opportunity to be successful to achieve our affordable housing targets while being mindful of this RDI evaluation as we look at adding the necessary capacity in doing what we need to do from a regulatory perspective to be successful in this next 20-year planning period. And I understand that was a really long answer, Councilmember Jacobson, I just gave you, but I do recognize that this was not necessarily an apples to apples process, and staff struggled with that a little bit as we've moved through the last 3 to 3.5 months that we've spent time working on this. We asked some of those same questions ourselves internally. This says one thing, this says something slightly different. Can we ever get this 100% reconciled? The answer is probably no.
Thank you. I understand the problem.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick stab at this. So Jeff, the RDI is working as a component of the GMA, and the GMA says plan for and accommodate housing units. 1220 has an affordable housing requirement that says plan for and accommodate these AMI bands. And the RDI seeks to not cause displacements in any and all of that. So now that I'm starting to understand the way you look at RDI, which is almost a do not do list, right? An area of, let's look at town center, and we'll talk about the horseshoe around town center that Adam kind of pointed out. If the do not do, the RDI component says try not to cause displacements here in the south end of town center, for example, but we do have to plan for and accommodate housing units, right? So we have to upzone something. How does the GMA, which doesn't want us to spot zone things, expect us to land that plane where we're trying to not cause a displacement, but add some capacity, but in an area of a subregion that, said another way, starts to sound an awful lot like a spot zone? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And some cities could really end up struggling with that in areas, where you've got a limited mix of different types of zoning and different types of uses. I want to go back to something maybe Adam said during that first part of the slide deck there. We're not necessarily in a do not do this there situation, but it may be a case where we've got to consider policies and implementing policies moving forward in our 2024 comprehensive plan that may look at try not to do something there, but if it must be done there, then we need to look at different policies that can perhaps help mitigate that. So, but to answer your question, Mayor, about the zoning, we're going to have to consider that very carefully. And I think one of the options that we have put forward for the council to consider here this will be at the final part of the presentation here this evening, is looking at a zoning district that doesn't currently have any housing in it. So that is one opportunity for us, Mercer Island, where we can look at that and we can say, hey, we've got an opportunity to maybe address this capacity, affordable housing target capacity problem that the math is showing, where we can add some capacity perhaps into a zoning district to make it a little bit more of a not a mixed use district as we think of town center, but a slightly different type of mixed use district in the commercial office zone. So I think that's an option that we're going to talk about later in the presentation, and that's certainly something that we can discuss and see what the council thinks of that sort of alternative.
Perfect. So council, any other questions before we move forward? Nope. Let's push forward there.
Okay. Adam's going to cover the next set of slides, which will be related to the land capacity analysis.
Great, thanks. Let's see. So next we'll take a look at the land capacity analysis supplement. And the land capacity analysis, or LCA supplement, evaluates our housing capacity at different affordability levels based on the Commerce guidance that was issued earlier this year. And this is a supplement to the land capacity analysis that we initially prepared with King County in 2021, or which was adopted in 2021 in the Urban Growth Capacity Report, or the UGC report. And what the UGC report looked at was really the total number of housing units that are possible or that are allowed given current zoning and current levels of development. But it was looking at that like total amount of capacity that's there. Whereas this LCA supplement that we'll be looking at tonight is looking at of that total capacity, how many units are available at or would be affordable at different income levels. And an important part of this LCA supplement is that it is part of the documentation that will help our comp plan update satisfy those GMA requirements. So it's required by the state law. So the first piece of this is to look at the housing need by income level. This is a new metric that we're using for this comp plan update. And this was directed by that House Bill 1220, required all cities and counties to establish their income need at different income levels. So this is table 1 from the LCA supplement. And this was adopted by, this is our housing need, which was adopted by King County Ordinance 19660. So this is set in the countywide planning policies, and now we're planning for these numbers here. And you'll see the total here in the first column, or in the second column here, that total of 1239. That's the original, that's our housing target that was set in 2022. So that original housing target. And so within that, that's our total. All of these other numbers to the right are a subset of that total amount. So each column here is a different subset of that total 1239. And so moving from left to right, you can see our housing targets at each of the different income levels. Starting with less than 30%, we have 339 units of non-permanent supportive housing and 178 units of permanent supportive housing at lower income level. Then 202 units needed at 30 to 50%, 488 at that 50 to 80% of the AMI, and then 4 at 80 to 100, 5 at 100 to 120, and 23 at 120% or greater. So those are our housing need, our housing targets at those different income levels. And the LCA is looking at, with our current capacity, our current zoning capacity, how can we accommodate those housing needs at the different levels there. Then the final column in this table at the right there, the emergency housing column, I've separated that out a little bit because that's actually a different type of capacity that we need to take a look at. Because emergency housing is for like homeless shelters, those types of units, and they're not really full dwelling. They're typically not full dwelling units like an apartment would be, or single family home. So they have some different requirements we need to look at for emergency housing. So with that housing need, then we look at our housing capacity as determined in that UGC report. So these are the total units that are possible given our current levels of development and current regulations. We see that total overall, we have capacity for 1,428 units. So we have enough capacity for our total number of units, but then we'll get into in the subsequent slides, kind of looking at how that breaks down for affordability. But we see in our very low density zones, which is like R15 and R12, we have 120 units of capacity. In our low density, which is our R9.6 and R8.4 zones, we have 235 units of capacity. And then in our medium low density, we have 10 units of capacity, and that would be like our MF2L zone. And then in medium high density zones, MF2 and MF3, we have 535 units of capacity. And then in our high density zone, which are our town center zones, we have 528 units of capacity. So that's our current level of capacity in those different zones at different density levels. And that'll be important as we get later into the report. So after we compiled that level of housing need, disaggregated by income level, and then our housing capacity disaggregated by zone, we took a look at housing affordability levels given current housing prices. So the table that you see here is summarizing 3 tables from the land capacity analysis supplement, tables 4, 5, and 6. Just in the interest of time, I kind of pulled those together into this single table. And so we took a look at the average sale price as tracked by the Washington Center for Real Estate Research. And in 2022, the average single family home sale price, detached single family home, that sale price was a little more than $2.6 million. And then the average sale price for townhomes and condos in 2022 was $660,000, or a little more than $660,000. And then the next step, directed by the Commerce guidance, was to take that average sale price and then calculate an average monthly cost for those different housing types. And so to do this for the owner occupied units, so for single family homes and townhomes and condos, we used the Fannie Mae mortgage calculator to determine what the average monthly cost or average monthly payment would be for the that average sale price. And so for a $2.6 million home, according to that mortgage calculator, the average monthly payment would be about a little more than $15,000 a month. For a townhome or a condo at that $660,000 range, the average monthly cost would be $4,085. And then for apartments, the Washington Center for Real Estate Research provides the average monthly rent for rental units. And in 2022, that average monthly rent was $2,528 a month. So that middle column there, the average monthly cost, that tells us how much households are roughly paying for the average unit in those different housing type categories. And then finally, we use that the average monthly cost based on a formula from the Commerce guidance to calculate what income would be required to afford that monthly housing cost relative to the area median income, or AMI. And so we basically, this is assuming that housing takes up about 30% of your household income. So we found that the average single family home sale price and average monthly cost, that would take a household income about 433% greater, or 433% of the area median income. And then for townhouses and condos that would require a household income, the average would require a household income of about 112% of the AMI. And then for apartments, based on that average monthly rent, it would require a household income at about 69% of the area median income. So that gives us the income ranges that each of those housing types would be affordable to, just at the market rate based on the current average monthly cost. So then from there, once we have that, we were able to look at housing affordability for the different housing types, and we can connect that to our different zones based on what's allowed in those different zones. And what we found is that, I just summarized that first bullet. So basically, all of our housing need below 120% of the area median income is likely to be accommodated in those denser housing types, because condominiums and townhomes require an income around 112% of the AMI to be affordable, and apartments require a household income around 69% of the AMI to be affordable. So all of our housing need below 120% of the AMI is expected to be accommodated in condominiums, townhomes, and apartments. And that's consistent with the Commerce guidance for evaluating this capacity, which essentially it's expected that denser housing types are more likely to be affordable. And so as we look at whether or not we have enough capacity to accommodate that housing need, we can look at the capacity in those zones where denser housing types, such as apartments and condominiums, would be allowed. And that would be our medium low, medium high, and high density zones. And then, and so what that looks like, if we look at, this is summarizing tables 8 and 9 from the LCA supplement. So as we look at, our housing, so in our zone categories, the very low and low density are most likely to be single family homes developed in those zones. And so we assume that then they're accommodating that income level at greater than 120% of the AMI. And then from table 2 of the report, we have capacity in our very low and low density zones for 355 dwelling units. But our total need for households greater than 120% of the AMI is 23 units. So we have a surplus in the very low and low density zones of about 332 units of capacity. Now, when we look at the medium low, medium high, and high density zones, so these are the zones where apartments and condos are allowed. There, we're planning on those zones to accommodate, or those zones are most likely to accommodate households earning below 120% of the area median income. And in these zones, in the medium low, medium high, and high density zones, we have capacity for 1,073 dwelling units in those zones. And then in the housing need, below 120% of the area median income, we have a need for 1,216 households to accommodate in those zones. So what that means is that we have 143 unit shortfall in our medium low, medium high, and high density zones to accommodate that housing need below 120% of the AMI. So that's really the key finding of this report, is that that capacity deficit, because at the end of the day, the city needs to be able to accommodate its housing needs and its affordable housing needs. And generally, those are going to need to be accommodated in our higher density zones where apartments and townhomes are allowed. And we need about 143 more units of multifamily and mixed use development to satisfy our housing need below 120% of the AMI.
Adam, I'm
Jeff?
going to just jump in here briefly before we turn it back over to the mayor here. This is the end of this subsection here, the presentation. Adam, can you just go back quickly to slide 24? So council, just repackaging this slide a little bit differently from what Adam said. The punchline here is that our single family development, low and low density type development is not going to contribute significantly or measurably to achieving this affordable housing target mandate that we've been handed here, just like all other cities in King County. So the focus here is on the medium and higher density type zones, right? To help with this. Not only does the math in the LCA report that's in your packet suggest that, but Commerce themselves have suggested that through their guidance, that this is where cities are going to have to look to be able to plan for capacity to achieve the affordable housing target, especially in those those lower percentage brackets that Adam walked through earlier. So in the second column from the right, the 1216 number and the 23 number equal 1239, which is our housing target that we were originally assigned as part of the GMPC process and King County process for employment and residential targets there a couple years ago. Part of that isn't going to be of great use to us, so we've had to focus on adding more capacity again in those medium to higher density zones, which is why now we're coming out with a negative number, is because we don't have enough of that portion of our capacity, existing capacity, to be able to handle
the need at these income, these AMI brackets that we've talked about. So we've got to make up this 143. So once we get done with Q&A for this subsection of slides, we're going to talk about 3 options that will help address this negative 143 to be able to have sufficient paper capacity to be able to move forward with the rest of our process. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you for Q&A.
Very good. So looks like Councilmember Reynolds has the first question here.
Hey, Mr. Zach, can you back up to, I believe it was table 1 that showed the housing need by income strata?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. How much, do we have an estimate of how much housing on Mercer Island currently is affordable at less than 30% of AMI? I'm assuming year 0.
Yeah, it's not, we don't have like hard and fast numbers. We have some data on which households in those different income bands are cost burdened, but that's slightly different than like a number of units.
What I'm worried about here is it seems like we're embarked on a plan that is doomed to failure, no matter which of the options we choose. Because if we only had 143 units, even if they're all, by some magic, we managed to add 143 units that are all affordable at less than 30% AMI, we're not going to meet that category. We're probably not going to meet the 30 to 50% category. We might meet the 50 to 80. But given that the apartments were at 69% of AMI was what the average was for those, I could conceive that we could meet that. But how are we possibly going to meet the others? Even if, would we have to take some that are existingly affordable only at above 70% of AMI and miraculously make them cheaper?
No, but part of this process includes updating the policies of the comp plan. So this first step is really addressing the capacity piece of it. The raw number of units that are allowed and what type of those units. But then through our policies, we can respond to those other kind of questions about getting those numbers to develop, getting those units to develop at different affordability levels. So for example, in the town center, we currently have a height bonus where in order to build to the maximum building height, you must include a certain amount of affordable units in the town center. We could look at adjusting that during the comprehensive plan update as part of kind of the next step of this process.
But correct me if I'm wrong, even if that height bonus, we said to do it, 100% of your units have to be affordable, we still wouldn't meet the 339 goal. Because we'd only be adding 143 units. They're all really inexpensive, and we still haven't met our criteria.
The 143 is additional capacity, zoning capacity that's being added over and above the existing capacity that already exists. So we're not creating a capacity of just 143 units where it's additive. We're adding the capacity to the already existing capacity that we have. And I think Adam just went to that slide there from the UGC report from a couple of years ago. Okay. Councilmember Reynolds, though, I do want to actually highlight though your question. Probably the most important part of your question that you asked was this is something that really needs to be realized, right, by everybody, is that this framework that we've been presented with, not just Mercer Island, but all the cities and counties that is being applied to, this is a very long game type of objective here that's been put in front of us. When Adam had that pie chart, it was slide 5 or 6 of the presentation back in the background section, the pie chart that showed where we're at now and then kind of going through essentially a 10-year cycle to 2034. The check-in that Adam referenced in 2029 is I mean, I can't say this with certainty, but the expectation, as I understand it, for this check-in in 2029 is going to be to see, A, that we got our comp plan done, which hopefully we will this year, but then B, what policy implementation and regulatory measures has the city embarked on to match up with this affordable housing target that we need to provide this zoned capacity for? So that's 5 years out. Like that's that stage we're talking 5 years from now, let alone 10 years from now, which will be the same process that we're going through right now, this periodic update of the comprehensive plan. So the reason why I say that is because this exercise that's in front of us with this LCA supplement that Adam's walked you through here at a very high level, and that's in your packet. And this item, it's almost like a checklist item, that the way that we've been looking at it at the staff level, we have to demonstrate through this 2024 update that we've got the zone capacity. We're going to have to demonstrate by 2029 that we've taken steps in to implement policies that come out of our comprehensive plan in 2024. And believe it or not, the whole process will start over again probably in late 2030 to go through the exact same process that we're on right now. So this is one very small step in a very long-term play, basically, to increasing affordable housing across King County and all cities, including Mercer Island. There's all kinds of other variables that are going to go into this on the heels of this comprehensive plan update, one of which Mercer Island has talked about extensively through the last 2 legislative sessions, which is providing additional funding at the state level to help cities and counties achieve these mandates that are coming down. In addition to that, something else that Mercer Island specifically brought up in the last legislative session was these housing bills that were being contemplated by the state legislature, and a few of them that passed, is having affordable mandates as part of those individual respective housing bills. And I believe, I don't want to speak for the city here in this session, but I do believe that that's going to be part of our position moving forward with future housing bills as well. Is we need to have the state help us with setting these mandates forward so that we can specifically target trying to achieve what's been put before us with House Bill 1220. So this is one piece in a lot of pieces being put together for a very long-term situation.
That's helpful. And in particular, the comment I was thinking about the 143 wrong. It's the 1428 or whatever that's relevant. It still strikes me as a very ambitious goal, but I'll,
I do not disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Okay, council, any other questions?
I have another one when the others are done.
Okay, just look for your raised hand there on the virtual meeting. Councilmember Jacobson.
In the calculation of AMI, are government transfer payments taken into account?
I don't believe so, but I don't know for certain.
Okay, well, that's not an answer that requires, or not a question requires an answer at the moment, but if you run across something and let me know by email, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, just as I think about potential solutions here, it seems from the questions I asked and the answers I got before the meeting, and thank you very much for those, by the way, we're perhaps unnecessarily limiting ourselves by not thinking about ADUs. And I wonder if you can comment on why we're not allowing for some of this capacity to be met in the single family zones through ADU creation.
So it is tricky. So we do allow ADUs throughout our single family zones, and we don't necessarily cap the numbers that are allowed. But we have seen recently that we haven't had that many ADUs constructed in the last few years. And so some of how the original UGC report was calculated, it basically it used these assumed densities that took into account like recent development densities, and that didn't necessarily include that additional capacity from ADUs. So we kind of carried that forward. I mean, they will provide some amount of additional housing capacity, and whether or not that would be affordable, it's kind of difficult to say because there's this other piece that we don't have a lot of good data on the price of those when they are rented out, because there isn't like a data set that says, you know, ADUs were rented out at this monthly rent. And so it's difficult to say where they would fit kind of within this framework. So there's kind of those two pieces. One, we haven't seen very many of them constructed, and two, we don't have a lot of data on price for an ADU.
Okay. If there is a way to get the data, and I realize there may not be, that would be very helpful to the housing work group to have, I believe.
So Adam, maybe I can step in just for a moment, but Councilmember Reynolds, the Growth Management Act allows us to plan for and accommodate a housing target, which we must show that we have the capacity during the periodic updates. The ADUs have been allowed to be counted for attainment, but never for zoning capacity. So even if you could have an ADU on every single family home and you could have 7,000 single family homes without an ADU, we, under the GMA, were never allowed to count any of that capacity, just the production of the housing units. So in Mercer Island, which is one of the jurisdictions that added ADUs to the development codes very early on, we have individually counted year by year the ADU creation, and that's counted towards our GMA target of attainment, but not zoning capacity. So that's kind of puts that to the side. The other piece of it that Department of Commerce has put together is a model kind of comprehensive planning cycle. So when Adam talks about medium low, medium high, and high density zones being the zones that we can count capacity towards the 50%, 30%, 0% push, those income bands, it's because Department of Commerce has guided us and said, if you create that capacity in those zones, then you'll be compliant. The alternative to having that capacity outside those zones is very complex. It requires looking at cost of housing and loans and all sorts of things that we would fail the test on. So we're kind of forced into this narrow path of conforming to Department of Commerce's kind of standard table-based zoning for this. And so all of the capacity for these 50% and below are going to have to occur in these higher density zones. And then there's another column in the Department of Commerce guidance that says with subsidy. So if you're at 50% AMI and below, you have to be in these higher densities and you require a subsidy. So to your earlier question about, well, you know, 100% of all of the capacity of town center has to be built at basically 50% AMI and below. Yes, we know that. We know that's not realistic. We know that our incentive codes at 10% to yield a 65% AMI unit is not going to get us anywhere near there. You'd have to have an order of magnitude greater density than what we have. But it does say in Commerce that if you put them in these density zones, and we assume that with a subsidy they could be built, that you're compliant. And so that's kind of the homework exercise that we have to conform to. But I agree that, you know, if we have a deficit of 143, and then by adding a story in town center, we create the capacity of 153, we technically meet Commerce's homework exercise. But as soon as a market rate development gets built, you now have a deficit, right? Because you didn't get 100%, 50% AMI and below units. So it might behoove the council to look at trying to add some headroom to the capacity number ever so slightly, so that we're not just constantly playing a game of leapfrog, you know, upzoning after every market rate development gets built.
Very helpful, thank you.
So this feels more like an exercise in planning than implementation. So Jesse, this question is more for you in terms of like conversations over the next decade. Once we do this exercise by Commerce, it sounds like a formula rather than sort of a reality check. Is there conversation at the city manager level or SCA or AWC level that over time we can bring some more sense to this? So these buildings might actually get done to meet this population housing we're trying to get? Like, what is the actual reality of all this exercise to actually get housing for these folks at these lowest income levels? I mean, I know there might be some incentives coming, but it's not going to be enough to really do what we're trying to do. So I love that we're getting capacity. We have some creative ideas and all these great reports and information, but really at the leadership level, for cities and city managers, what is actually happening and what should be changed that we can lobby for in the next few years?
Thanks, Councilmember Weicker. And I think I'm mostly going to restate what Jeff Thomas said earlier. You're correct. This is a planning exercise. It sets up the framework that we need to be able to implement, work items in the future. Certainly, we don't have the resources, and in some cases, maybe not even all of the tools to do this alone. So are folks thinking about it outside of the cities? Our associations that we work with? I would say yes. It's going to take us and our advocacy to make sure that this remains a priority. I imagine at the conclusion of 2024 and as we look into 2025, so let's say our 2025 City Council planning session, we would likely take the freshly adopted comprehensive plan and use that to inform, work plan discussions for the following year. So get the framework in place this year. And then absolutely, we have more work to do. But it's a hard question to answer, Councilmember Weicker, and I'm not dodging you on it. I think it's going to take everyone, state, county, cities, our associations working together.
And it's such a deep policy wonky discussion that I think we're going to lose your average citizen who might still be paying attention at this point, not falling asleep. It's really complicated, tough work. And so keeping vigilant and making sure these legislators, when they throw these bills around and staff have to do it, that we somehow keep it on our collective to-do list down at the bottom somewhere to not let it fall through the cracks, I guess, for advocacy where we can improve on the edges until we can improve at the core.
Absolutely. Let us not forget in the affordable housing realm that we have our friends at Arch, which we are a member. And I certainly hope a lot of this will organize and land under that type of structure. It's going to be a lot for a city like Mercer Island to single-handedly be able to implement successfully. Jeff, anything else you would add?
Well said.
Okay. Council, any other questions before they move on? Not seeing any.
Okay,
Alright.
so we've got a final set of about a half dozen slides here that Adam's going to run through the three options. A couple of them have come up already in the conversation here this evening. So Adam, here you go.
Great, thanks. So just as a reminder, so we're not necessarily looking or asking for direction on these three options tonight. As Jeff mentioned earlier when we in the introduction of this topic, we'll be coming back on January 16th to get the council direction on a preferred option for addressing that capacity deficit. And three of the options that are presented in, or staff presented three options in the LCA supplement. The first option is to increase height in town center by 1 story. The second option in the report was to allow multifamily in the commercial office zone or the CO zone. And then the third option presented in the report is to increase the maximum density in the MF3 zone or the multifamily 3 zone. And these options are discussed in detail beginning on page 23 of the report. So you can see the analysis of each of these options in detail there, and then some of the implications of the benefits and drawbacks associated with each of the options. So to start with, the first option, as I mentioned, was to increase the height in town center. This option, as analyzed, would add an additional story of height in each of the town center's sub-area plan or sub-areas. And this would add about 153 units of capacity to the town center zone or town center zones. It would increase the height in the TC3 and TCMF3, which is the pink and yellow area here at the south end of town center on the map. That would increase those zones from a 3-story height limit to a 4-story height limit. And then in the TCMF4 and the TC4 zone, so that would be the olive zone and this royal blue zone, kind of in the center of town center. that would go, those areas would go from 4 stories to a maximum of 5 stories. And then in the TC5 and the TC4, which are the purple and tan zones at the north end of town center, this option looked at increasing the height there from 5 stories to 6 stories. And this is the first option discussed in the report. You can see the analysis beginning on page 23. I see Jeff jumped on here.
Yep, just real quick, Council. One of the questions that was posed to staff leading up to tonight's meeting was, rather than do this blanket 1-story approach in the TC, is it possible to possibly do 2 stories in some areas and not increase the stories in other areas of the town center? The answer to that question is yes. For simplicity's sake and, trying to come up with a couple of viable options here to address this paper capacity deficit, we started with the 1-story throughout the entire town center. It worked. The math worked. So that's where we stopped with the town center. And then we moved on to a couple of other options. But I just want to make that clear, given that the map is in front of you here on this slide. There are variations of this in the town center that the math most likely we can get to make work. It's just this is the one that seemed the simplest to take 1 story across the entire boundary and see what the math produced. Adam?
Well, and I neglected to mention this at first, but what we're really looking for with all 3 of these options is a high-level direction about the approach. And then the finer details of what that exactly looks like, we can work out later in the process. But we didn't want to start heading down a road that the council wasn't interested in. So we really want to get that high-level direction. This one kind of general approach is the preferred alternative. And then, like I said, we'll work out with the housing work group and the planning commission and ultimately the city council what the fine details of each of these would be later in the process. So the second option analyzed in the report is an option to allow multifamily in the commercial office zone. The CO zone is the area along 36th surrounding the City Hall property. It's highlighted in orange on the map here. And allowing multifamily residential uses within this zone would add at least 143 units, and it could add up to 895 units of capacity, depending on how those the development standards in that zone that would apply to multifamily would ultimately be shaped. So those development standards can really pretty greatly modulate what the total capacity increase would look like. So for example, if there was a maximum lot coverage, that could reduce how much development could happen on a lot, or depending on the building height, that can really influence capacity. So we could take a look at that. But in general, because this zone doesn't currently allow residential uses, allowing multifamily in the zone is expected to produce enough units to address that capacity deficit. And then the discussion of this option begins on page 28 of the report.
Adam, can you, for the council and the public, but also for me, actually, can you remind us that's a wide range of numbers there on the screen, 143 to 895. Can you just quickly walk through what those 2 bookends represent in terms of the math?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So the 143 units, like I said, because there isn't currently multifamily or mixed use development allowed in this zone, we expect that any addition of allowing multifamily would address that minimum deficit. And then that upper bound, the 895, that was we analyzed this zone, what the capacity implications would be of essentially using the same assumptions as the TC4 zone. So assuming a 3/1 mixed use development where there'd be commercial on the first floor and then 3 floors of residential development on top. Again, that's kind of, that highlights that point that, you know, development regulations, how we allow the use could really influence how much capacity we actually add there. But that 895 upper is looking at if we applied the TC4 regulations to multifamily development in the commercial office zone. All right, and then the final option that was examined in the report is to increase density in the MF3 zone. The MF3 zone is shown in the map, or on the map here on the right side of the slide, with the pink slashes for those lots. And basically, currently in MF3, the maximum density is 26 dwelling units per acre. Increasing that to 30 units per acre would add, or could add, up to 174 units of development capacity in that zone. And this is a relatively simple amendment in terms of the amount of code that would need to be amended for this. But there's like some other pieces of this. You'll see in the report, we discussed this a bit, that there's some other regulations within that zone that would need to be looked at the same time, because maximum density isn't the only development regulation that's really limiting development in these zones. So we need to take a look at those other pieces too, if this is the preferred approach. And as we discussed earlier in the RDI evaluation discussion, this is an area that we did highlight as having some displacement risk. So we would need to be mindful of that if this were the selected option as well. And those are discussed in more detail in the report. And this third option, the MF3 density option, begins on page 34 of the report. So those are the three options. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back to get your preferred approach on January 16th. And then looking ahead after that, after we get your direction on a high level preferred option, we would then resume working with the housing work group. And we're currently aiming to start to find a meeting date the week of January 22nd that would work for the work group. So we'll get them started back up and looking at these options. And then we're aiming to get a housing element draft to the Planning Commission by the end of March to keep on schedule with our comp plan update. And that concludes my presentation. So I'll turn it over for any questions at this time.
Very good. So I think we have a question from Councilmember Anderall.
Yeah, thank you. So the three options that we've had a chance to look at here, as I've been thinking about this over the weekend, and of course, because of the holiday, didn't get a chance to give you a heads up at all. But since we're not deciding anything today, can you talk about the South End business area? I can't remember what the acronym for that is, but where the QFC is. Was that under consideration at all? Because it seems to me that it would tick some of the same boxes as allowing residential in the commercial office zone. And I'm just interested to know whether it was considered and if it should be considered.
So the acronym is PBZ, the Planned Business Zone. And that was not analyzed as an option in the report. It could be, that could be something if the council was interested in taking, going that direction. We could look at that, but it wasn't included in the report.
But I mean, so it just, is there a reason why, when, like I said, to me, at least from the way it lives and works, it feels like commercial or a subset of town center. So it seems like if you're considering changes to those, that this was just categorically not even on the table, much less on the table and then off. I'm just curious about that.
I think the options, the MF, the CO, and obviously the town center options that we did take a look at. We were focused on the north end of the island out of respect for access to public transit. That was certainly a driver in the areas that we looked at. But as Adam mentioned, we could certainly, at council direction, we could certainly look at the south end of PPZ area and come back and report to council on that as to what how the math speaks to that.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Thanks. Yeah, Jeff, actually, my question is around some of what you just said about transit. Adam, in the numerous guidances and laws that you were tasked with trying to compile to create this document, and I know there were many of them, was there any guidance that was given around how we should consider existing transit versus future planned transit? My guess here is that the further you move to the left on the chart of AMI, the more important that becomes. Can you give us a little color here as we think about what option makes the most sense going forward?
Yeah, so there isn't a requirement in terms of House Bill 1220, there isn't a requirement that we locate this proximate to transit. I mean, it's a good practice because that can allow you to, it makes it easier to access the services and employment. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons to do it, but there isn't necessarily a requirement. But there is in House Bill 1110, which is the middle housing bill that we'll be looking at immediately following the comp plan update. 1110 does require some additional affordable housing requirements around within a half mile of transit, and so there will be some changes there. There's a density bonus. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but 1110 has some addresses transit as well.
And there's also now, as we'll see in the legislature kicking off here in a few days, the possibility of a TOD bill coming back.
Yes.
Make some more challenges in terms of our long-term planning, but I think it's something to keep in mind as we think about what option makes the most sense.
Yeah, and to the deputy mayor's point there he just made about a potential TOD bill, could very well have semblance to last year, which was not only requiring near transit, but also significantly reducing, if not in some cases, eliminating parking requirements. So, which makes the geography all that more important when we start looking at transit facilities and so forth to comply with something like that.
Thanks.
Very good. Councilmember Weicker.
Skipping ahead here a little bit, should we look at option B? Can you talk about how we might regulate housing in a commercial zone? I know there's a little nuance that Mayor Neese wants to bring up, but in general, how does it work in other cities when you change to allow this kind of use in this kind of zone?
Jeff, did you?
Yeah, maybe I can give the short answer, and Adam, you can either correct me or expand where appropriate. Councilmember Weicker, we've got a lot of flexibility, right, with how we would need to update development regulations in a commercial office zone if we were to pursue that type of option. But there's no hard and fast rules. We certainly have a lot of variability we could look at and how we craft those development standards and how the council ultimately through the housing work group and the planning commission would like to see housing in that zone if that option was to be pursued. We used Adam, remind me, it was the TC4, was that what it was? The TC4. Yes. We use that really just for the purposes of doing the math. But we could certainly take elements of regulation from the town center zones and apply it to a TC zone, which would become kind of like a mixed use zone, but we'd still want to see commercial office type uses there rather than, just having restaurant retail, for example, like we do in the town center. So we can do a lot of different things with massing and architectural type standards how we would want that to look. So kind of a blank canvas, so to speak, in that CO zone. So yeah, we can go a lot of different directions that would all be not only lawful, but also, aesthetically pleasing to the city. So.
Very good. All right. So, Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, you're probably going to stick more pins in the Jake doll once you hear this question, but I have actually, I think, two semi-related questions. One is it to our advantage, either strategically or tactically, short-term versus the long-term game about which you've been lecturing us on or reminding us of, Mr. Thomas? Are we better off maximizing our capacities, going beyond, 143, 150, or whatever that shortage we have? If we go beyond that, is that to our advantage?
No pin in the Jake doll were required for that answer. I think the mayor may have said it earlier in one of his comments, the concept of leapfrogging, where if we do create a little bit more capacity up front, we may not have to revisit this as frequently. It would make it a less frequent subject of conversation, perhaps, with both the staff and the community and the council, where we create some room where we can kind of work up to it over time. I don't know, just to be candid, and I don't think Adam knows either, but he'll tell me if he does. I don't think we're going to have this. We are going to have I suspect we'll have some annual reporting requirements. It may not be in the exact form of 1220 reporting, but there will be some state reporting required. Some of the reporting requirements have changed here recently. Probably if we're able to create some additional capacity, we don't have to leapfrog as often. So that could be a good thing where we may have to cycle through it a little less frequently than perhaps what some other cities may have to do. That's the best answer I can give you at this point, Councilmember, to that.
Well, my second question would be, and I preface it by saying I understand at this stage, all right, the idea is not to broaden the number of possibilities we have, but to narrow things down so your department can get to work and really, along with the housing group and get to a solution on this. But I'm wondering, and I have not, played with the advantages and disadvantages, if we were to pick some parts of, excuse me, all three of these kinds of things, would we perhaps eliminate pain, maximize our capacity, and do some things? And that's, I guess, an opinion being cloaked in a question, but
Picking.
I haven't thought it through to
Oh, yeah. Yes.
the implications would be, and maybe they're all bad if we do that, but that's a question. And again, it's not one that probably is easily answered right this minute.
Picking some combination of the three rather than just one of the three could certainly have some. The primary thing that pops to my mind is that it could, excuse me, preserve some future flexibility for the city. So the MF option, I think this may have gotten mentioned earlier as well at some point. The MF option, when we look at that option, we look primarily to the Shorewood area. And I think there's a couple of things in play with the Shorewood area. One would be, we talked about displacement possibility earlier in the presentation. I think that certainly exists there with a Shorewood redevelopment or partial redevelopment. But the other thing up in that area is I think there's some potential infrastructure issues that would really have to, the that may have to be addressed before we ever see fruit being born on that tree up in the MF, that MF zone. So maybe, looking at a combination of options or the CO options and the town center options, that certainly is something that could certainly give us some additional flexibility here as we move forward in time and, either learn more about how Commerce views this or looking at new requirements that are coming down the pipe here sooner than later from the state. So those were both good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this may be a question for you as much as anybody else since you've been so involved with the GMPC, but I'm wondering about the politics of the overshooting. So for example, if we plan for 1428 and then later the GMPC says, we really need to create some more capacity because growth is bigger than we thought. Are we wise to have kept some capacity in our back pocket and not exposed it? Because if we say 1800 now, will they just add 200 more on top of that? Whereas we would have rather had to add 200 to 1428.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's any hidden capacity advantage. If you look at Mercer Island, we're the 10th most densely populated island in the U.S., contiguous U.S., anybody could envision Mercer Island being Manhattan, concrete lakeshore to lakeshore. So I don't think we're tipping our hat there. I think it's actually the other way around. In the 2029 check-in, when the GMPC looks at comprehensive plans and makes an assessment of over the previous 5 years, how has a jurisdiction done towards meeting its AMI goals? What you don't want them to do is be looking at capacity and then pointing the finger and saying, that's your problem. Well, what we'd like to do is add a little headroom so that when you get to 2029, there's still some capacity on the books. And we're able to say, we had incentives, we had subsidies, we turned REIT over to Arch, we did all this, that, and the other, and we underperformed. But it's not because of a lack of capacity. And I think that would be the reason that I would go towards adding a floor in town center, mostly because I think TOD is going to happen to us. And so that's a foregone conclusion. And then adding a limited kind of incrementally scaling element to the CO zone, which was the amendment that I sent out, basically allowing the 3/1 on CO parcels not immediately abutting a residential zone. And then as development patterns and practices change, you would add some incremental capacity in the CO zone. It would be kind of a mild redevelopment risk.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so council, on January 16th, this is planned to come back on consent. If we can land the plane tonight and get it is, what the council decides on tonight. The other option is to just punt on that and have a discussion January 16th. Do we think we have enough consensus tonight to try and give staff guidance so that it's coming back on consent with an option that we all agree on?
Well,
Councilmember Enroll.
I know that I want more information on the PBZ, but I certainly got no groundswell of support on that from anybody else. So to me, it just seems bizarre to be making this kind of a decision excluding the only other piece of property that doesn't currently allow for multifamily or residential use. So I certainly would like more information on that. If we're not going to get that, if 3 other council members don't want to give a thumbs up on that extra work and we want to just move forward on these 3 options, I don't know where I am.
Okay. Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, so I had 15 questions submitted to staff last week, and my compliments to Jeff and Adam and Allison and others who were involved for putting together very thorough answers to that for before the meeting. I don't have any follow-up questions on that. I do want to share some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight about the feasibility of achieving the assigned affordable housing numbers. And I do think along the lines of what Jeff was saying, that there are going to be infrastructure issues likely with all of these options. When you add more people, you need more infrastructure. exactly what those infrastructure issues are going to be, we will find out as we analyze it further. But I encourage everyone not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. I think creating a broader spectrum of housing on the island is a positive change, even if we don't achieve the aspirational numbers of HB 1220 and Commerce. I think we're moving in the right direction. We're moving in the direction that we have to, according to the state law. And I think we'll get there in bits and pieces.
So just while we're still on you, do you feel like you want to have more discussion on January 16th, or do you feel that you have enough data at this point to provide direction to staff?
I think it would be useful to have more discussion on January 16th and to hear from the public on this. I think that we don't have 100 people in the audience tonight, but I think that if there's some now that this discussion has taken place, that there may be more people that want to talk to us about it between now and the 16th, or even on the 16th.
Very good. All right, Councilmember Reynolds.
I had a similar reaction. This feels to me like one of the biggest decisions we've made in a while and are likely to make for a while. I think having a little more time to ponder it and seek input from the public is wise.
Got it. Councilmember Riker.
So I'll just say we have a long way to go, and with the hope of getting some direction here, I would be in support of moving forward with recommending staff look deeper into option B with Lisa's PBZ addition or complement or whatever that would look like, and bring us something to talk about on January 16th. I don't think we need 2 hours on the 16th, but I think if we have a little more data about our commercial zones, I'm inclined to go there because I think our town center is pretty built out. We know legislation's coming, and I don't think messing with Shorewood, given their infrastructure and capacity and knowing they get their water from Seattle rather than our system, like that just feels more complicated, and especially when you add that RDI risk. So I think option B is our best bet, especially with Mayor Neese's recommendation that housing regulations be really clear on the border with any single-family properties. So I'm going to put a stake in the ground and see if we can get support for 4 to move forward with B, with the caveat of the PBZ and the very clear standards at the start about not having 4-story buildings next to somebody's backyard.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, question for Jeff and Adam. Adam, I know that this draft took months and months of work. I don't know. I agree with Councilmember Anderall that I think getting some more information would be helpful, but I don't know if that is something you can reasonably do in a couple of weeks here. Could you talk to that?
Adam is the math runner here. So Adam, I guess that's a question for you to answer. Is it reasonable that we could run a similar mathematical approach for the PBZ area at the south end, and then report out on the math results here in a timely fashion for the 16th?
Well, so it's definitely possible to run the numbers for PBZ. It seems it might be tough to get it all together by the 16th. But I think if option B had that asterisk, we could do that math as part of what we bring to the housing work group, and it can just get added to the record as we move forward too. If that's if we're not able to get it by the 16th.
Okay, so college try, sounds like. So it sounds like this will be coming back for another discussion January 16th. We don't need to provide any other direction tonight unless anybody has something to provide. Councilmember Jacobson.
I would just say this, I would like some more time to absorb this and think about it, and hopefully ask some questions in advance of our next January 16th session. I would say, I think, as I understand it, Shorewood is the largest single multifamily chunk we've got. I think there's 660 units or something like that. And given the size of it and the infrastructure problems with it, I have great reluctance in fooling around with Shorewood. I think I think that's just beset with problems. And the other thing is, I think the PBC is not a very good idea either. And putting aside the uproar that will come from that neighborhood, which happened when it was incorrectly zoned CO 4 years ago. And some maps and, that led to quite a lot of back and forth, to put it mildly. And so I'm stuck between some part of A and B downtown. And the thing I see there is that if we put our eggs in that basket, that's the end of commercial business in downtown, because what's built down there, the small businesses, the Terabellas, the experiences, these kinds of things aren't going to be able to afford to be there. The Island Books either. But that's probably going to happen anyway. The Boyd collection's gone, Cabot Square's gone to a single developer. And it's just a matter of time until all those buildings come down and the permits go into Jeff's shop to build a large multifamily thing. And that's, at that point, that clears out, and a good portion of the small businesses, there are probably 12 businesses that are in that area, and they'll be gone and they won't come back. There's no place for them to go. So I'd like to wait until the 16th, and I promise to do much better job of my homework here. So.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Anderell.
Yeah, well, I would just say that for further direction, I would be also in support of not further pursuing the Shorewood option because of the infrastructure issues there and the displacement issues. And I know that Councilmember Jacobson and I may disagree on further analysis on the PBZ, but if additional capacity there allows us to not go up in town center, then I think it's worth at least getting the answer to the questions. And then, philosophically and policy wise, we can make whatever decisions we want to, but at least we'll have done it in an informed way.
Very good. All right. Any other discussion? Not seeing it. We'll move on. Thank you, Jeff and Adam. And
Mayor, if I may, just before you move on, so just for clarity, so what we'll do then, we'll do our best. The old college try, as you put it, before the 16th. We'll take the TC4. We'll take the TC4 from the town center and we'll apply it to the PBZ, and we'll see what the math says for the 16th. That would be the same as what we did for the CO option.
And so that means 3/1, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, that's what we'll do. Thank you.
Not seeing any. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. So moving on, we now have other business and planning schedule, and we welcome back City Manager Jesse Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look ahead, council, your next meeting is Tuesday, January 16th. The day prior is the Martin Luther King holiday, so we'll be factoring that into our planning. I will note this is a kind of a heavy capital project update meeting. We'll also be providing the Parks Levy annual progress report. As you look at the planning schedule right now, the calendar looks a little light. That is a bit deceiving. I just need to get on the staff a little bit about getting all the items added to the calendar. So welcome back to 2024. We will make it a priority to get that planning schedule updated so that we can plan ahead. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Councilmember reports. Councilmember Anderell, anything to report?
No.
I don't expect much coming back from the holidays.
No. Happy New Year.
Councilmember Jacobson.
I attended by Zoom the December 13th AWC meeting. Or I'm not sure it was AWC, but and voted for their slate, and then they moved on to the area we don't belong to. So I did what I was told to do.
Thank you for doing that. Your duty. I have nothing to report. Councilmember Reynolds, anything to report?
Happy New Year.
All right. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
I just want to say thanks to everyone. It's been a pleasure being deputy mayor last 2 years, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve. I'll do my best as I took the oath and appreciate that. So I just want to say thank everyone. Appreciate it and look forward to the next 2 years.
All right. We appreciate your service too. Councilmember Weicker.
3 things. First, I love hearing those kids play basketball next door. This is great for setting up City Hall. Thank you, staff, for getting that done in time for the new year. Mayor and Deputy Mayor, thank you for your service again. Appreciate you stepping up for 2 more years of leadership. And then finally, AWC is having their Olympia City Action Days on February 7th and 8th. So if y'all want to come down and lobby our legislators on all manner of things, housing, transportation, economic development, and taxes, whether you agree with AWC or not, come down and talk to your people.
Very good. Councilmember Weinberg.
I just wanted send my compliments to the city staff. Congratulations on successfully converting this room, the Slater Room, into council chambers. It's great to be back in person again.
Here, here. All right. The next hybrid meeting of the city council is scheduled for Tuesday, January 16, 2023 at 5 p.m. The time is now 7:44 p.m. The city council will go into executive session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, close paren, lalai, close paren. No action will be taken following the executive session. As a reminder to the city council, please stay seated until the staff has terminated the broadcast. Good evening.